Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition from the other sideline, part of the Frogs Insider podcast series, brought to you, as always, by Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We are about to hop into our preview for Friday night's game against the Arizona State Sun Devils. TCU and Arizona State's first matchup. I can't remember if it's 35 or 55, but it's been close to 100 years since these two teams have played. So needless to say, we need some help to get us ready for the Sun Devils on both sides of the ball. To do that, I went to the expert, was recommended to me by multiple people as somebody to talk to for this game. I've got Chris Karpman, happy to have on the show with me today. I'm struggling with words. I apologize for that, Chris. He is the owner, publisher of SunDevilSource.com. 20 years covering the Arizona Sun Devils for 247 and others. Chris, really appreciate you taking some time.
My pleasure. And I believe that they played in 1975. I didn't know
75?
Yeah, I didn't know that either. But then somebody mentioned that when we were recording a live podcast on Monday. So, yeah, it's been 50 years, I guess, since they
74.
Oh, 74. Okay.
Almost to the day, 9/21, 1974. Two all-time matchups. Looks like 74 and 75. So you might be right here with your 75 is the most recent time. But yes, yeah. So 1975 in Fort Worth, 1974 in Tempe. TCU with an 0-2 record against the Sun Devils. So this is a get-right game. It's a get-back game.
Yeah, that one probably won't have any impact on this outcome.
Yeah. You never know. I'm sure the SEC will use it as a marker of why one of these extra Big 12 teams should not get into the postseason. But that's neither here nor there. We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what is potentially has a chance to be the most fun game of the Big 12 season so far. I know we had big expectations for Texas Tech and Utah. That one ended up being kind of a blowout. Arizona State played a really fun game in Waco in the fourth quarter. The first three were a little bit of a slog, but something tells me we might see both of these offenses cooking Friday night in Tempe.
Good chance. Yeah. ASU has been fits and starts on offense so far this season, but good balance. Rushing game has been pretty good overall. People expected Sam Leavitt to have a great season, and that hasn't really materialized to this point. But Jordan Tyson's one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the country. And at home for ASU, that's lends itself to, I think, a little bit of a better offense. ASU needs to do better in the red zone and on short yardage situations, goal line situations against a potent TCU offense for sure.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you some kind of like establishing questions, but I teed you up to talk about the offense. So let's just start right there. We can get to the big picture stuff at the end of this. Let's talk about Jordan Tyson and what makes him so special. Obviously, him and Sam Leavitt had such an incredible connection a season ago. Took him a little while to get going, but I think we saw signs of that down in Starkville, right? And that late in that game when they made that comeback attempt. We saw him play really well when Sam Leavitt needed a receiver to step up in Waco. What is it about that combination, those two players, that has made them so effective?
The great athletes. I think that's where it starts. And they have great chemistry. They understand post route, scramble drill. ASU does a pretty good job with the coordinator, Marcus Arroyo, of moving Tyson around the formation to try to get him in the advantageous matchups, personnel-wise or against defensive tendencies down and distance related. Jordan Tyson is a 3-level route runner. He's somebody that gets great separation. He understands how to convert in zones. He high points the football, contested catches, very quick reaction time. After the catch, he's extremely dynamic in terms of his ability to change directions and gain yardage. He's just one of these guys where the game is slower for him than it is seemingly for everybody else around him. And he and Levitt just have this really natural chemistry that developed early on last season, and it kept getting better and better and better. By the second half of last season, he was averaging well over 100 yards per game and making some really big-time receptions. And then he broke his collarbone against Arizona in the regular season finale, and he wasn't able to be on the field for ASU either in its Big 12 championship win over Iowa State or in the Peach Bowl against Texas. I really think that had Tyson been available, ASU probably would have beat Texas actually, because he's that much of a difference maker from a passing game potency standpoint.
Yeah, and you talk a little bit. You touched on maybe what's been considered a slow start for Sam Levitt, and maybe the Arizona State offense, but certainly has not been a slow start for Jordan Tyson. He's already got 31 receptions for 357 yards. That's well over a third of the way to his total a season ago. He's already hauled in 5 touchdowns. He had 10 in 2024. The issue for Levitt might be is nobody else has really stepped up next to him. The next highest receiver has only 13 receptions, and it looks like only one other player is in double digits. Is that just kind of a microcosm of Levitt looking for Tyson because they've been in some of these close games, or are they still waiting for kind of that wide receiver 2 to step up?
Yeah, there have been several contributing factors to that. Jalen Moss, who's their starting slot receiver, he's a transfer from Fresno State. He hasn't played the last 2 weeks, and he's not going to play in this game either. He's had some injuries, and then he had like an eye infection and illness. So he's not practicing. And as a result of them being sort of thin already at wide receiver from their talent depth kind of standpoint, they played in more 12 personnel groupings the last few weeks where they've had 2 tight ends on the field. Would take a slot receiver off, add another tight end. They have between Shimon Mateer, Cameron Harple, and Kamari Anderson, 3, I would say, good to very good tight ends. Harple was all-conference second-team guy in the Big 12 last year. And then they've thrown the ball to the running backs quite a lot. The heavy utilization of running back and tight end screens. And then another factor that's contributing is that Malik McClain, their other starting wide receiver, Levitt's missed him on some throws. He overthrew him twice in the first quarter against Mississippi State. And there have been some other just kind of missed connections, or where maybe he's not seeing it, or he's throwing it to Tyson instead, as you're going to be prone to do when you're getting man coverage. And then ASU's just barely missed on several shot plays down the field. Jaron Hamilton's a big shot play target, and McClain and Tyson, and then a few others. They've had penalties where, if not for the penalties, they probably would have connected on some big plays. And I think you put that all together in a smaller sample size of 4 games, and you're going to get a little bit of a misperception about where they're at with their passing attack. Now, with Jalen Moss not playing the last few games, their top slot backup, Derek Eusebio, played very seldom in against Mississippi State or Texas State. But then late in the game against Baylor, he had a 60-something yard reception on the 3rd and 13. That was one of the biggest plays of the game. And I think they're going to get him more involved this week. So they'll probably be less 12 personnel, a little bit more balanced in terms of what they're doing with their groupings.
Yeah, I mean, the running game, you lose, a Heisman candidate, a guy who was all world, who could do so many things on the field, and Cam Skattebo. But it seems like that for the most part, the Sunday Devils have continued to be able to run the ball. It's just not, being spearheaded by kind of an all-world player, but they're getting a lot more guys involved. I don't think you can compare the running game in 2024 to the running game in 2025, but what do you think that they're doing effectively this year, and where can they maybe have some success against the TCU front that's been pretty good at containing opponent running games, that they really haven't seen a great rushing attack yet?
Yeah, Cam Skattebo was so good at getting yards after contact that sort of overcame some blocking miscues or breakdowns, or maybe just guys not executing at as much of a high level. And those blemishes show up a little bit more when you don't have that type of a presence in your backfield. But ASU's running backs are still pretty good. Tyson Brown got hurt and didn't even really play almost at all against Mississippi State, Texas State, barely came back and got some reps against Baylor. He was a starter at the beginning of the season, and even when he was out, ASU ran the ball quite well between Raleek Brown, who's the top backup, and he started the last couple of weeks, and then Kanye Udo, who was a 1,000-yard rusher at Army before he transferred. And Tyson Brown's going to play more this week. I think Raleek Brown is a twitchy speed guy who's got the game-breaking ability, not as many yards after contact, not as much of the inside runner every down kind of a back. They have more of a big play capability where it's not breaking 2 or 3 or 4 tackles than they had with Cam Skattebo, but they're trading the ability to get some of the harder yards, the short yards, the goal line type situations. And so they have to improve that. Marcus Arroyo, their offensive coordinator, talked about maybe needing to be a little more creative when you don't have Cam Skattebo. They also lost their center from last year, who was an all-conference player, Lee Fautanu, which prompted them to move Ben Coleman from left guard to center. They have 4 returning offensive line starters, but center's the most important position, of course. So when you don't have, as much as they have returners, losing your starting center and Skattebo, that's been a factor. And then also probably underappreciated is the 2 wide receivers not named Jordan Tyson, who were starting last year, Melquan Stovall and Xavier Guillory. Those guys were excellent blockers, and that really showed up in the run game and in the screen game. And so they need to get some of those guys doing a little better job as well.
You talked about Sam Leavitt and people kind of thinking that he would build on next season and kind of jump off the page. Potentially it was talked about as a Heisman candidate this year. It hasn't been bad by any stretch of the imagination. Sam Leavitt's still playing pretty good football. But his completion percentage is slightly down. His yards per attempt are slightly down. Looks like he's still on pace to throw about the same number of TDs, but he's throwing a little bit more interceptions. How would you rate kind of it's not really a sophomore season, but he played a little bit as a true freshman, but it's really a sophomore year. How is year 2 going for him? Where do you think that he has improved, and where does he still need to get better in order to be able to take Arizona State back to Arlington in December?
Yeah, he's played decently well or better, just that the expectations are so high. As you said, someone who was expected to be a candidate for Big 12 Player of the Year, a Heisman Trophy contender if ASU had a great season. And we're not seeing stats that jump off the page. We're not seeing that first-round NFL draft type of performances to this point. He did play reasonably well against Baylor on the road to help ASU win its first Big 12 game, completed almost 70%, didn't throw an interception. He's very dynamic, so he's able to scramble and get a lot of yards with his feet, either by design or on third downs in particular to move the chains. I think that what he has to work on is taking what's being given to him. I think he has so much confidence and belief in himself that sometimes he'll force the ball into some lower percentage opportunities rather than just accept the shorter throw that's going to move the chains and help keep you on schedule and get your offense into a better overall rhythm. And then just some of the fundamentals, like making sure that you're not so reliant on your talent. You got to still step to the target, get your feet set, make the right fundamental type plays and have good mechanics and all that. They've been settling into an understanding of the type of offense that they need to be able to be successful without Skattebo. And I think that they're getting into a better rhythm now that should continue this week.
I think one of the things, and you mentioned this, his ability to run both the design plays, to extend plays, to keep his eyes downfield, and then to scramble when necessary. He's using his legs, it looks like, a lot more so far this season. He's already halfway to his 2024 rushing total. He is 1 touchdown away from matching the 5 he scored on the ground a season ago. That, to me, is going to be something to watch. TCU obviously just played Kevin Jennings, who's one of the most dynamic athletes playing quarterback in the game of football, and Jennings did a really good job of keeping plays alive, and it was super accurate on the move and made some throws into some really tight windows that were really impressive. TCU struggled to get pressure on the quarterback in a 4-man front without having to send a blitzer or someone extra. And so that, to me, is going to be something to watch. It seems obvious that the Sun Devils aren't afraid to let Levitt use his legs. Do you think that's something where they'll try to exploit a TCU defensive front that whiffed a little bit early against Jennings, but was able to kind of tie him up late in that game?
Yeah, I think they've actually gone to more first level read option and some design quarterback runs the last couple weeks as they've realized that maybe their passing attack and their wide receiver capability is not as robust as they had hoped. So they've been making this early in season adjustments stylistically. And you got to be careful about bringing pressure to Sam Leavitt because he's very able to sidestep, spin out of things, break containment either outside or through the middle. And then if you're sending guys, you're probably playing more man coverage, which means the defensive back's eyes are not on Leavitt. And so he has a chance to go get a lot of yards in those situations. And that's a demoralizing thing for defenses to face when the coverage is solid, the rush isn't bad, and yet you're still seeing first down. He's the type of quarterback who's able to go get that for you. And when things aren't working for them in the passing game the way that they hope, you're going to see even more of Sam Leavitt trying to run around the field.
Yeah, I think to me, what I'm going to be watching is when Leavitt breaks contain and he's moving and he's not looking to actually run the ball, but is able to find Tyson. That's where TCU defensive backs have struggled, is kind of with that quarterback that's off schedule a little bit. And it's going to be fascinating to see if they can exploit some matchup issues potentially with Tyson and Leavitt when Leavitt's on the move, especially if TCU is sending a blitz and maybe they're not having an extra help over the top for Tyson in those moments. I think that's going to be one of the areas I'm definitely going to be keeping a close eye on.
Yeah, that post route capability and their feel for scramble drill with Jordan Tyson is quite good. They actually miss an opportunity against Baylor where Jordan Tyson was open in one of those situations and Sam Leavitt didn't see it, which is sort of atypical. But his off-platform throws are incredible. I would tell people to go watch the highlight that Leavitt had throwing across his body to Jordan Tyson against Texas State, that Jordan Tyson then jumped over a player and had like 3 steps just inside the boundary to score a touchdown. If you want an idea of what these guys could do in their just improvisational flair, that is extremely impressive. Just go watch that play and you'll see that it's something that's going to have to be accounted for by TCU.
I'm going to be really hopeful that the only place I can watch that type of play is on film from previous games and not in person on Friday night. That's going to be my hope. On the flip side of things, I'm going to be real. TCU's offense has been a little bit uneven. The offensive line has been more good than not good, but we still haven't seen them against a great defensive front. And I think there's some people that would say SMU's defensive front was stronger. There's some people that would say Arizona State's defensive front was stronger. How would you rate their performance 4 games into the season? And do you think that they can give Josh Hoover and the TCU run game a lot of problems on Friday night?
Yeah, I'm not sure. TCU seems to be not as big up front as some of the other teams that ASU's played against, but quick. And it's going to be interesting from a matchup standpoint because ASU's gotten a lot bigger and stronger at the point of attack since last season. Sun Devils were first in the Big 12 in run stopping last year, and they have 7 of their top 8 defensive linemen back, including Clayton Smith, 10, 15 pounds heavier, starting edge, and Prince Dorba is 10 pounds heavier. And CJ Fight is playing as well as anybody as a nose tackle who can eat up a lot of these double teams and allow the linebackers to come up and fill and make plays. And Jordan Crook and Keyshawn Elliott, ASU's 2 starting linebackers, are playing probably at an all-conference level. They're right there at the top in overall tackles. The thing that you're not going to see from ASU is a lot of speed rush, exotic stunts and twist actions and run blitzes to try to do things. Now, maybe they try something different because Josh Hoover is ultra talented, and Brian Ward, ASU's defensive coordinator, said that he thinks that Hoover is the best quarterback that ASU's played in the Big 12. That includes last season. So that's very high praise there. And maybe
you like that guy.
Yeah, he's a really good coordinator and super honest about the things he says about opposing teams' personnel. So he's not just gassing up Hoover or anything like that. So what ASU showed against Baylor was a willingness to play more press man coverage. It's primarily a cover 3 match zone team. But against Baylor, because Sawyer Robertson was so good at getting out the ball quickly underneath coverage, ASU went to get into some more press coverage to not allow those early throws, to allow it's 4-man sort of pressure to be able to get in there. And also you don't expose yourself as much to getting gashed in the run game because a team like TCU does enough as an air raid team in its run game to where you can't just solely focus on being a coverage team. And that's, I think, part of the interesting challenge this week. But I don't think ASU is going to go get a bunch of sacks. They might get some coverage sacks where they're able to kind of keep containment. And then if Hoover can't get out, they're maybe be able to get there. I think he's going to be really good at getting the ball out on time, though. On average, he's as good as anybody at understanding pressures coming from the left, got to get the hot route there and all of that. So I don't really anticipate ASU bringing a lot of pressures. I think ASU will just try to play a mix of coverages and try to just play very solid defense and not allow big plays.
Yeah, and it's going to be really fascinating because, Kavorian Barnes, TCU's big running back, the kind of the downhill guy, was on the injury report that was released last night. We'll see. He could still come off of it. I don't know that he will play. I don't anticipate that he will play at this point, but I think he could be a difference maker, especially when it talks to the way that Arizona State wants to play defense. With the wide receivers against Arizona State secondary, it's a very different story than I think what we've seen on the offensive side for ASU so far. And that TCU's played 3 games and had 3 different 100-yard receivers. Most recent game, they had the best statistical performance of the season of any team at a receiver with Eric McAllister. How do you see ASU handling TCU's receiving core defensively? Is there an area, when they are playing that cover 3, when they're playing that matchup zone, where you think the TCU offense will have some success throwing the ball downfield, since that's obviously what they're looking to do?
Yeah, I've always admired Sonny Dykes and what he does offensively with his teams, with how they're able to generate matchups that they want to try to take advantage of. ASU has one of the best corners in the Big 12, Keith Abney, and their other corner, Javen Robinson, has also played quite well. The areas where I think that you're going to see TCU try to exploit would be in the slot. Kendrick Breedlove, he's done pretty well in coverage, but they play a lot of off coverages there. So probably a lot of quick game opportunities underneath on some leverage routes, in and out breaking type things. And then I would look for Miles Rouser, ASU's boundary side safety, to try to get matched up in some boundary overloads, or some flood concepts into the boundary, or twins where they're trying to get some coverage in some quarters, or maybe cover 3. I think that those players, Rouser and Breedlove, are going to be super important on the innermost defensive players on either side of coverage for ASU, because I really don't see TCU or most teams being able to get on top of ASU's corners on the numbers or outside. That's not where the success is going to be had. It's going to be more of the matchups and trying to exploit some individual man type either looks or in straight man against those inside receivers. And TCU has some slippery receivers that can hang out in the slot and be very effective getting the ball to on those early leverage, quick game type things and RPOs. And that's what you have to be aware of if you're ASU.
Yeah, maybe, Joseph Manjack and Ed Small in the slot can have some success. We've seen Jordan Dwyer have some success over the middle. And then, of course, TCU's used the tight end extensively so far this season, something that hasn't always been the case. And so DJ Rogers and Kamorian Pimpton has been practicing, and I think he played a couple of snaps last week, but he could be a big difference maker, a highly touted transfer from LSU. I think it's a fascinating matchup, and when you look at this conference as a whole, getting the win on the road in Waco is a big deal for ASU when you think about who the contenders are. Year 2 for this program in this league. Obviously what they did a season ago, they shocked the world so much that we eliminated preseason polls in the conference. Like it was right. That much of a chaotic. Yeah. What has helped them be so successful so quickly? When you look at, it wasn't that long, a couple of years ago, TCU was 5-7. We look at what's happening at Oklahoma State. It was supposed to be a flagship program. Everybody thought Utah would come in and dominate, and they certainly have not done that to this case. What is it about Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham, the people involved in that program that have been able to elevate them so quickly to be a top quarter of the league program?
Yeah, a lot of ingredients kind of went into that. They did a great job evaluating the transfer portal. Taking a lot of guys that blue blood programs didn't want and turning them into really good starters. I think that their culture was extremely strong and how they established that. And they're super process oriented, not really worried too much about like the results. They weren't thinking about winning the Big 12 at the outset of the season. They were just focused on having the best day, the best week that they could have. And then football, ultimately, turnover margin is the most important stat. ASU finished the Big 12 atop the conference in turnover margin. If you look this year, which teams are surprising in the Big 12? Well, Arizona and Houston are undefeated, and they're both tied for first in FBS and turnover margin at plus 2.0 per game. And then even the next teams that are doing really well, like a UCF, which wasn't expected to be really good, is also in the top 10. BYU is in the top 10. So TCU, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe has had a positive turnover margin in every game that is played this season. And ASU probably only beat Baylor because it had a +3 turnover margin. And then run stopping, especially when you can take that on the road, super important. ASU was first in the Big 12 last year in run stopping. So if you win turnover margin and you stop the run and then you don't give up explosive plays over the top of your defense, you're probably going to be in the game. And ASU last season had the most one-score wins in ASU history. That was the thing that I don't think anybody could have expected when you have a first-year starting quarterback and you're coming off of a 3-9 season, and the whole sort of accepted paradigm is you have to learn how to win, right? Well, ASU didn't even learn how to win. They just won all the close games. And everyone was like, how did that happen? You guys were 3-9 last year, and you had a first-year starting quarterback. But again, turnover margin and run stopping is what puts you into the position for that, and not giving up the big ones over the top. ASU lost to Mississippi State because even though it only gave up 4 passes of more than 15 yards in the game, 3 went for big play touchdowns.
What were they doing defensively on that last play? Like, what was the call? Like that, I think everybody I know in college football that was watching the game went, what were they hoping to happen? Because that's clearly not what actually ended up being executed.
They were in quarters coverage, which can look like man, because quarters is when you're playing, like, dividing it up in force. And what happened was their inside receiver on the play side, inside defensive back, pardon me, on the play side, Kendrick Breedlove, who's their new nickel, who replaced Shamari Simmons, the only really big loss from last year's defense. He saw the switch release with one receiver crossing the face of the other receiver, and he bit on that, seemingly losing track of what the actual coverage was. And then that led to a huge bust that proved costly. Also on that play, Xavier Alford was blitzing from the number 3 over the number 3 receiver, and his foot caught on the foot of the receiver. Otherwise, he would have actually hit Blake Shapen probably in the chest before the ball could have even come out. The thing that I suggested after that game was, had they switched the roles of Breedlove and Alford on that play, you don't have a bust, and you probably can still get the sack or the pressure that prevents that explosive. So 2 of those touchdowns that they gave up in that game were bad coverage busts. One of them was just a guy getting beat by a super speedy receiver in man coverage. That's going to happen occasionally. But you can't give up those big explosives, especially in that type of a situation. Sure. Quarters coverage really isn't that aggressive. You just got to not let the guy get beyond you, and then they have a catastrophic bust.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And I think it kind of put people off of Arizona State unfairly. And I think going into Waco, winning against a Baylor team that looks like they could be pretty good, hopefully reminded people that Arizona State's truly a contender. This is a big one Friday night. I think when you look, at Texas Tech is the team that everybody's going to say is the team to beat right now, and I think that's fair. Arizona State's got a win over Baylor already. They're another team that's probably going to be in that mix. This one could be really, really important when you talk about, teams that are going to make it to Arlington. What's your? I'll allow you to make a prediction if you're willing. I know not everybody's willing to make a prediction, but if you aren't willing to make a prediction, what would you say has gone right if Arizona State wins, and what has gone wrong if TCU wins? And how does this impact Arizona State's ability to get back to Arlington and play in a second consecutive Big 12 championship?
Yeah, so we're on a short week. Usually I do most of my research to the fully in-depth for our prediction ahead of our Thursday afternoon podcast. So I'm not all the way there yet.
All right.
I think that Baylor was a good matchup for ASU, and I picked ASU to win by 3. That's what happened in a game that I also thought wouldn't be high scoring. And I said Jesus Gomez would play a huge role. So that all worked out. This week I have less comfort. I'm probably going to pick ASU to win really narrowly because of the home field advantage, which I think matters a lot.
And your subscriber base, you got to you can't let people be thinking you hate your team.
There's that too. There's that too. But I think in the long scope of things, accuracy matters as much as anything, because you don't want to have people like ticked off at you because you're always picking the team to win and then they don't win. So there's a trade-off to that. I honestly try to just do the best I can at understanding what the challenges are like in a game. So for example, TCU's done pretty good against the run. I think ASU needs to be able to establish a run and have balance offensively to expect to be able to put up enough points against a TCU team that I think will do well at moving the football. So this game probably will come down to red zone efficiency, turnover margin, and run stopping. Really, those aren't surprises. I'm kind of leaning right now to like a 31-30 type of a game, because I don't think it's going to be super high scoring, but also not low scoring. And we'll see. The injuries, I got to do more research on TCU's injuries exactly, and we're going to see about a couple guys with ASU this week because they've been playing with some guys banged up, and that could also affect it. But honestly, like if I continue to watch more after we get off this recording and I feel like I'm not actually feeling as good about it, I could easily switch my pick. But I really do think it's going to be a 1-score game. It's hard to predict anything other than a close game.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the biggest differentiator right now between these two teams is where it's being played. Both teams coming off a short week. Arizona State's got a little bit less rest playing the night game, whereas TCU played at 11 a.m. Both of them played in hot environments. And it looks like it'll be relatively pleasant for Arizona in September, Friday night. So hopefully that won't be too much of a factor. I expect to see two really, really fun, really good quarterbacks playing good football. I agree with you. I think low 30s is probably where this one sits. And I'll be freaking out until the final buzzer. I think it's going to be a really, really tight one, and hopefully a great showcase opportunity for the Big 12 and for people to realize just how fun this conference is and how great the quarterback play is with these top teams.
I fully agree that the winner of this game is one of the better positioned teams in the Big 12 picture, right? Like if ASU beats Baylor and TCU at the outset of the season before a bye week, and then can somehow go win at Utah, which is a monumental task, then ASU is sitting in great position. Of course, that's the odds of that happening, certainly less than 50-50. TCU wins this game. I think TCU's got a ton of wind in its sails, big road win, and feeling really good about where it's at with its overall capability. So the Big 12 looks like a ton of parity. I agree, Texas Tech at the top. Then after that, it's like you could put 5 or 6 teams
Iowa
randomly.
State's really good.
Yeah. I mean, Iowa State's really good. I still think Utah, even though it kind of laid an egg, is going to be there at the end of the day. And ASU's got a tough schedule because it has to play all these teams. TCU,
that's
Utah,
what I was just looking at.
That makes it harder, but
you're probably Tech's last losable game would be my guess. I think that's the only other chance to upend the Red Raiders and give them any chance of not making it to Arlington. That at TCU at home, at Utah, Texas Tech at home, Houston, it's feisty, but you get them at home, and then at Iowa State. That is a heck of a stretch for ASU and Kenny Dillingham and those boys. That's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. So this is a very important game for the home team for sure. Chris, I want to thank you so much for jumping on. Your knowledge, your insight was unbelievable. Arizona State's still so new to the conference. Like having somebody that obviously knows this program so well is just a boon to TCU fans, and I think people are going to really enjoy this. If they want to learn more about what you're doing, what you're covering, and get the in-depth and the actual final prediction for this game, where can they find your work?
Yeah, at Sun Devil Source or at ASU247.com or My handle is just my name at Chris Karpman on multiple platforms. So yeah, check me out there.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Chris, and look forward to seeing you in Tempe, hopefully on a breezy and pleasant Friday night.
That'd be wonderful. It's been 100 plus for like 4 months, so we're looking forward to it.